It's time to cut through the noise and get back to what really matters. Let's talk.
This evening, our special guest calling in is attorney Ken Good. Attorney Good is a graduate of Hayden Simmons University, where he received his BA, and he received a Master's of Education from Tarleton State University, which is part of Texas A&M. Ken received his JD from Texas Tech School of Law, where he was also a member of the Texas Tech Law Review. Attorney Good has argued cases before the Supreme Court of Texas, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, and the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Ken is married and has 2 children. Welcome, Ken.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, of course, of course. And Ken, before we get started, we also have in studio guest with us who's going to be participating, and we want to welcome Frank Friends. Frank is a husband, father of 2 children, small business owner, concerned citizen, a loyal listener, and frequent caller to TWAC. Frank and I follow each other on social media, and some time ago, Frank posted a question as to why prosecutors and judges continue to release violent criminals back on the street after committing numerous heinous offenses. I believe that was the gist of your question, right, Frank?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely was.
But I knew that Ken would be on our show, and I asked Frank to hold that question. So welcome, Frank, friend.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so Ken, did you hear our question of the day? I know that's going to be our topic, so you might want to just let our audience know exactly what cashless bail is.
Well, sure. Cashless bail is it's called different things in different states, but when you boil it down, it's the defendant is giving you nothing but a promise, like a pinky promise, that they will reappear for hearings or court appearances to answer the charges that have been filed against them. What bail is what assurance you're going to give to court that you're going to come back and answer the charges. It doesn't have anything to do with about guilt or innocence. That's for trial. That's been resolved by the courts long ago. It's all about what assurance you're going to give to the court that you're going to come back if they release you to answer the charges. And cashless bail is, I'm only giving you my personal promise and nothing else.
Yes. And do they have to even sign anything? I was under the impression that there was a couple of cases in North Carolina, which we'll get to, in which the defendants just sign and say, yes, I'll be there. And so, but you're saying that they don't even have to do that much in cashless bail.
Well, I mean, it depends on where you are. I mean, in North Carolina, it could be a promise. I mean, something that they've signed. In Texas, it would be a personal bond, and they would sign that bond, but it's still just their promise, nothing else. In New York, they would call it release on no bail, and in California, they would call it released on zero bail. So it's what we call it could change from state to state, but it's all the same. I mean, even in Texas, if you get a personal bond for $5,000, it's only a promise that you will come back, and you're not going to pay them $5,000. At most, they'll take a judgment against you, and you can't afford to pay it. So it's just your bare promise that you'll come back, whether it's signed or not.
Okay. So, Frank, do you have any comments on what Ken just said?
Well, I mean, you got to look at the society the way it is now, because you've already promised to be a good citizen because you're, probably a multi-time offender. You've not kept that promise. 82% of all murders have a violent prior, and about 11 times is on the average that they're released before they commit their first murder. So they've had 11 chances to not do this and to keep their word. What promises are they keeping?
Okay. And so, Ken, before we get any further into the discussion, let me throw this into it. You are a Texas bail attorney, and you're a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. How does cashless bail impact the bonding company industry?
I think the cashless bail probably gives the whole criminal justice system a bad name. And the bail industry is, whether you realize it or not, is part of the criminal justice system. So, when you release somebody like Frank mentioned, they have so many priors, they have a long criminal history, and you continue to release them without accountability, that undermines the credibility of the entire system, the courts, the bail industry. Everybody ends up with, mud on their face that they're not doing their job, because, and it's especially true when you start these, simple release alternative systems that are really just nothing more than experiments, because, their failure to appear rate is so much higher than the private industry. So it gives the whole criminal justice system a bad name. So
basically, they're doing social experiments on using the defendants and criminal matters, basically. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, and oftentimes, since the failure to appear rate is so much higher for these simple release mechanisms, so these personal promises, that the defendant ends up in a worse position just simply based on the type of release. I mean, Frank really made a good point. When you start using these, you end up not being able to hold anybody accountable, because, when you have so many failure to appears, then your backlogs start stacking up. And as your backlogs increase, and that puts pressure on courts to dismiss cases. And when you dismiss cases to keep the system from collapsing, suddenly criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime. And so I think what Frank was saying is, all these priors that they've committed before they commit their first commit a murder is really true. Using these alternatives creates a problem for the system. That's so much pressure to prevent collapse that they just don't hold anybody accountable because they can't.
Okay, so let's step back a little bit. Now, how long has this been going on? Because we know that people want to, like you said, this is a social experiment that they're committing on our communities. But before we even go down that road, I just want people to know, and we'll get back to this later, it's in my note, but that Nevada does not have a cashless bail system. And so thank goodness for that. They've tried to introduce legislation to implement little small portions of it, but to date, we don't have that. And so, cashless bail became a national issue after the murder of Irina Zaruska, a young Iranian refugee. The law known as Irina's Law was passed by North Carolina legislature, and it sat on the governor's desk for several days before he would sign it. Now, no more cashless bail for violent criminals offenders in North Carolina. And they have, I just saw a post last week where a couple of young kids were brought to court, and they thought that they were going to walk free. And then the judge told them that they were going to impose that they will not be walking free and that they would have to be remanded until trial. And so now we're getting to see a different look that's going on in our criminal justice system. So, how do you anticipate? Okay, well, tell us a little bit about Texas, because we just heard that Nevada does not have cashless bail. So in Texas, you do. Is that correct?
Well, we probably have a very similar system to Nevada in that it's been pushed by, some courts. We have a federal court in Houston, Texas, in Harris County, which entered an order requiring cashless bail, personal bonds for most misdemeanors. That case went up to the Court of Appeals. It's been reversed so many times, but in the meantime, they entered into a settlement, the county did, and gave the plaintiffs everything they wanted, and they entered into a consent decree. So even though the courts keep reversing the case, they gave the plaintiffs everything they wanted, and they've been living under that consent decree ever since, for 5 or 6 years. And I think the Attorney General just entered an appearance in the case seeking to have the consent decree set aside. And I think they just filed a notice of appeal to the Fifth Circuit, an interlocutory appeal. So I think Texas does not. In fact, Texas has been limiting the use of cashless bail for violent offenses. But we've got some outliers in Houston and Harris County where the local elected officials and the plaintiffs' attorneys kind of colluded to enter into a consent decree for political reasons.
Okay. So callers, our number is 702-221-7283. Please call in and join the discussion. And so, when I was in law school, one of my first semesters or so, I was an intern at the San Francisco County Jail, and I was working on the OR, and OR, which is own reconnaissance, for defendants who committed a misdemeanor, basically, and they were. It wasn't a violent offense. And so if they had not committed any crimes previously, they would be released on their own just by saying that they would return to court. So that was kind of like the beginning of, I guess, cashless bail. But this was for non-violent misdemeanor cases. But we're talking in this case about violent felony cases. And so,
well, but that's always the way it starts, and then they start change. Like in California, they changed certain felonies to misdemeanors, and they changed theft under $950 from a felony to a misdemeanor, and then DAs in certain urban areas decided, well, we're not going to even prosecute that crime anymore, and so we've had a crime run amok for theft under $950 in California for the last few years, until I think that proposition was repealed by the voters. So, but that's where it starts. I mean, but there's a DA in California that did release some very valuable information comparing the release of nonviolent offenders. One on a personal bond and the other on one on simple release, cashless bail, and the other released on a surety bond. And he found that the one released on cashless bail had a 200% greater chance of committing a new violent offense in the next 18 months versus someone released on a private surety bond. I mean, with that kind of statistics, why would you even release nonviolent offenders on cashless bail?
Let's get back to what you just said. Some DAs, some judges, activist judges, they want to circumvent the laws that are on the books, and they want to do what they want to do. And I call those activist judges. And so if we have these liberal DAs and liberal judges, they are the ones that are kind of pushing this cashless bail issue. Is that correct, Frank?
Oh, it's absolutely correct. But the problem is that not only are they not affected by it because the crime's less likely to hit their neighborhood because they live in gated communities, but what you have to understand is they are literally committing an experiment on society, which is illegal. It's illegal for us to be participating in an experiment not of our own junction. That's
yes, we have to consent to it.
We have to consent to it. And that's the problem. We're not consenting to this. And it's creating such a form of entitlement amongst the people that what you get is you had this two young men who broke into a home, crushed a lady's orbital socket. Her husband shoots both of the intruders, killing them. The families try to fight him in court when he's found not guilty of murder. And now they're suing the same man for $1 million. You've created entitlement of this constant release.
Yes. And so, again, it's a social experiment that some DAs, some judges want to impose upon their communities. And it's been playing out for years, and the results have not been what they thought it would be. And so why do you think they have come up with this idea, Ken?
Well, I think part of it's just politics. For many election cycles, 6 months before a major national election, either presidential or midterm election, there would be something that happened in the news involving law enforcement, and they would use that to stoke the flames of political dissent, to tell certain groups that you are being mistreated and that you need to get angry and you need to come out and vote in larger numbers for us. And then after the election, everything would go back to normal. And so what they've done is they've created a mob. And when you create a mob, you lose control of the mob. And so the mob has started electing like-minded people to them. And so they listened to all the rhetoric that they've been using for years, and they've started enacting policies to enact that rhetoric. And we're seeing the problems with it, because what we know now is that activists never admit their policies are not working. Usually in our country, when something doesn't work, we say, okay, that didn't work, so let's try something else. Well, We don't hear that from the people pushing these policies.
Because they want to double down on it.
They're not working.
They want to double down.
We just need more time. We just need to, and they'll lie. They won't admit crime is going up. They'll say, "Oh, we're safer by releasing more criminals," which has never been true in our history.
So, Frank, you have.
Well, I was just going to say, the problem is you guys are approaching it like it's not working. No, it's working exactly how they want it to work.
Yes. They know it's going to cause
lower property
chaos.
Values,
yes.
Lower property values in lower income neighborhoods. People can't start businesses in there. People don't get good education because there's not good property tax involved. Why do you think they do all of that in low income areas and then they don't allow school choice?
Yes.
Well, I think there is part of the coalition that I agree with you. That is what their motivation is. But they can't get to a majority with just that part of the coalition. So they have to have the well-intended people who really are forgiving on our criminal laws and want to see people turn it around. And they're just being used and abused by the activists.
Definitely. So, Ken, do you happen to know either Rick Green or Tim Barton?
I am aware of their organization, Wall Builders. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I thought that you might have more of a relationship with them, but
because they're from Texas.
Yes, because they're from Texas, and they're headlining this event. And Rick Green is the one that started the Patriots Academy. And
yes, ma'am.
We took that class, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who has the opportunity to take it. And so, Ken, President Trump issued an executive order calling for the end of cashless bail. And this bill needs to be codified by Congress, and that means both houses of Congress must pass a uniform bill to be signed by the president in order to make it the law of the land, and not just an executive order. And so what do you think about that, EO, signed by President Trump?
Well, I think it's a very much needed executive order. The problem is bail is regulated by the state. So the bill that was introduced into Congress was to end cashless bail in Washington, D.C., which is regulated by Congress. And that bill has passed the House and is now sitting in the Senate. But it's difficult for the federal government to issue the same type of statute for all the states since bail is regulated by the states. What the executive order does is it empowers the Attorney General to identify the jurisdictions that use cashless bail and then to identify grants that can be withheld until they get rid of those types of policies.
Yeah. And so it's very important for states to have a legislature which will try to pass bills that would limit cashless bail in their state. And that's the only way that those things are going to be taken care of on a state level, because as you mentioned, the executive order only covers federal, particularly Washington, D.C., federal territories that would charge to impose cashless bail. And so Trump wants to make sure that does not go forth any further. So,
well, let me also say, President Trump looked at this issue and he sees the damage that cashless bail is doing across the country and to these very jurisdictions that won't even admit what they're doing is actually harming public safety. And so, when you see the blue states get all upset, it's because they're being called on the carpet for their own lies to their community. And so I applaud the president for what he's doing. He's doing something that most Republican presidents would not do because it deals with deep blue urban cities, which normally, Republicans can have very little impact on. So I think he knows the difficult issue that he's taking up when he does this, and he doesn't care. He sees it as what they're doing is wrong, and he's trying to correct it. And that's the right thing for public safety.
Yes. And as we all know, that Washington, D.C. is not governed independently, but like you said, Congress has to pass the bills to make sure that certain laws are enforced in that jurisdiction, and cashless bail goes to the point that even when President Trump sent the National Guard in to clean up the city, they found out that there was a lot of fraud and misuse going on in the police department.
Well, and that's a big thing that you have as well. One, they know this cashless bill doesn't work, so they want the problems that it's causing. And you see that you got to jump through these hoops and through these legislations. So my big thing to the listeners is going to be, you guys need to understand you cannot rely on government to fix this issue. You need to be your own first responder. You need to be ready to defend your family and your loved ones whenever one of these felons comes out here with their 13, 14 priors and they decide to assault you randomly, like that lady who got assaulted with the stick in the eye.
Yes, I saw that.
You know, that dude is like a 15-time felon,
yes,
and he identifies as transgender as well. So he has multiple mental issues, multiple felonies, and that lady's not allowed to defend herself in that state.
And Ken, were you going to say?
And I would just underscore what he's saying is that, to a certain extent, the Democrat politicians are being held hostage on these issues by their donor class. And so if they decide that, hey, if they were to stick their neck out and say this isn't working, immediately the next day they would lose all their fundraising. They would they would immediately have a candidate announced to run against them in the next election. So to a certain extent, our politicians that are on the left are being held hostage by the activists and the donor group. And so we need for our listeners to vote law and order. I think that began with Trump's second election, and if we can do it one more time, then the Democrat Party will change and become law and order like they historically have always been.
Well, you can't do that when you have George Soros backing all these DAs, all these judges, all these other little politicians here and there. Well, he has his agenda. We know what it is. He's not hiding it. It's not behind the ball. It's not the balls in the other hand trick. They're literally showing you what they want. Cashless bail, multiple time felons back out to re-offend and re-hurt somebody in society who hasn't taken their safety seriously, who's not vigilant, whose face is in their phone when they're walking around instead of looking for the threat, because the threat is going to be from somebody like that.
Yeah. And so
I do agree with you that is George Soros's intention. But what we're finding is that the soft on crime DAs are having a very short shelf life. I mean, look at Gascon in California, who was the leader of this soft on crime. He got beat by 20-something points when he ran for a re-election the second time. So they have a short shelf life. They don't get past the second re-election.
Yes.
Yeah, but when 30 murders of an innocent woman happen in that time frame, it's already affected that community.
It has, but the replacement DA is usually a law and order DA. So a return to law and order is what follows a George Soros soft on crime DA.
Definitely. And so I just wanted to let people know that in Nevada has a history of trying to implement at slow little increments of cashless bail, and it started in the year of 2016, and again in 2019 they tried to do this, but they never get out of the assembly session. It never gets voted by the full legislature. But even Governor Lombardo in 2025, he wanted legislation to extend bail hearings to 72 hours and to add sentencing enhancements on crimes committed when a defendant has been released. And this bill did not result in any major revisions to cashless. It did not result in any major revisions to cashless bail, which remains basically unchanged. So Nevada is standing firm in that instance, and we have to make sure that whoever we elect in our legislature, that they understand that we don't want cashless bail here in Nevada.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't want it as a father and a husband. I wouldn't want somebody coming to my house like we just talked about, that lady who got, attacked in her own home. And now that family's suing the husband for $1 million because he killed the two attackers. The stress, the mental anguish that puts on a family. Now your home's no longer a safe space. You defended your wife's life, but that's no longer safe by societal standards either.
I don't want to be cynical here, but with more crime, are attorneys more likely to support cashless bail since they have more clients?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Well, speaking for me, I've never been a criminal defense attorney, so I can't answer that. But
I don't believe that the cashless bail, that what's driving that is an increase in criminal cases, so that helps criminal defense attorneys get more clients. I think what's driving it is just politics, and it's a cynical look at society that we can make one segment of the community angry to get them to vote, come out, vote in larger numbers, and then win a few more elections. I think the use of this cycle ended with Trump's most recent election because we didn't have that type of cycle for the first time in several elections. And so I think we're starting to see a backlash on crime, just like we were on the border. And with what Trump has shown, we know how to fight crime. What he did in D.C. had a major change in crime, and he's doing it in other cities, and you're not seeing it being reported except for, this, to make it look bad, because the Democrats, can you imagine what would happen in the inner cities if they admitted crime was going down and we knew what to do it and they were refusing to do it? They would get decimated in the next election. So they have to lie to have a chance at defeating Trump's policies.
Well, I think in Chicago, there's a little contingent of people that are calling that mayor out constantly.
Oh, yeah, the Make Red movement?
Yes, yes. And so, I mean, the bottom line is you have people that come up with these policies. They do not live in the inner city.
Nope. Gated communities with armed guards, but they don't want you to have it.
And they do not go into those communities if they don't have to go into them. And so what gives them the right to think that people want to remain living in that type of situation? That is so...
It's a self-sense of ego.
Yes,
I can be your only savior.
Yes.
Only me. Only I can do it, and what I believe for you is best.
Yes. And so, I mean, right there, people are, they're just tuning in now, and they're understanding what's going on. I mean, no one should have to live in fear of being...
Well, look at Cook County. Look in Cook County in Illinois. The clerk came out with data showing that under these simple release mechanisms that they're using, they have like a 70% failure to appear rate. And compared to the private industry, which has a less than 10% failure to appear rate, you can see how backlogs in criminal cases suddenly start piling up more and more because you can't go forward on a criminal case if the defendant's not there, except in very limited situations. So you put the case on hold long enough, suddenly you're looking to dismiss the case because you're adding the same number of cases over time. So you get pressure to just dismiss criminal cases, especially the nonviolent ones. And that's why you see that when they start dismissing cases, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime.
Definitely. And so, callers, our number is 702-221-7283. I know this is something that we should be having more discussion with our callers. And it just seems that people are maybe they're watching the football game that's on.
Never. Not the Niners.
But anyhow, we just wanted to make sure that our listeners knew about this, even though Clark County and Nevada are not implementing anything remotely similar to cashless bail, but we still need to make sure how we address crime. And it's just not here in Clark County, but across the country. And Ken, what is your proposal to try to limit cashless bail in Texas?
Well, in Texas, we've implemented a statute saying that, essentially cashless bail cannot be used for a list of offenses and we're concentrating on violent offenses. But another thing that we did is we required judges to review the criminal history in setting bail for all charges from class B misdemeanor up. So a judge is required to consider the criminal history, which is the best number one indicator of whether someone's going to commit crime in the future is whether they've committed crime in the past. And like Frank said, if they've got 17 priors, then even if they're charged with a misdemeanor, they need to have bail set based upon their criminal history. And in Texas, we've required judges to do that. And it was just like 4 to 6 years ago that we did that. And you would have thought it was just common sense that you would review criminal history in setting bail. But Texas didn't have the infrastructure to display the criminal history to the judges. And I think finally, we need to be giving judges more discretion, not less discretion. See, these simple bail policies, these cashless bail policies, tie the hands of judges and say, you have no discretion. You have to release someone on a cashless bail system if they're charged with these whole list of crimes. And when you do that, that's where the career criminals, the gangs, and the organized crime learn how to take advantage, because these cookie cutter release systems where everybody has to be treated the same, no matter how many times you commit the same crime, you can see where organizations or criminal elements can find ways to make millions of dollars out of it.
Yes. And so, some of the factors that should be taken in consideration are, particularly in violent crimes, whether they are a flight risk and to preserve the public safety. Now, a lot of times the people that are trying to implement cashless bail, they look at it from a different perspective. They look at it as to whether the defendant has the financial ability to pay the bail instead of trying to make sure that the community is safe.
He's here because he robbed somebody, but we're worried about his financial stability to get this cashless bail. I mean, that's the type of logic you see from some of these judges. It's like, okay, it's your 13th robbery. Yeah, we'll let you out on overrecognizance. Just promise me you'll come back Tuesday.
And you're listening to Talk with a Conservative. So, as we wind down, Ken, is there anything else that you want to add to our discussion before we sign off this evening?
I would like to add one thing is we've learned so much about AI, artificial intelligence, but I would just like to say that from the criminal justice standpoint, artificial intelligence, AI, ChatGPT is not really artificial intelligence. It's a news aggregator. And our activist groups have learned how to flood Google with fake or pseudo studies. And so if you were to ask ChatGPT, what would happen if we defund the police? Well, the science on that is settled. Crime would increase, and especially the murder rate would increase. But if you do that, ChatGPT would talk about the savings, the financial savings for the county, and that money could be put towards social programs. And so it's just spitting back all of the pseudoscience studies from the far left and from the activist groups. And so we have to realize that when you ask ChatGPT a question, it's not true AI.
Yes.
And so. And I would say if people want more information about me or my group, they can go to pbtx.com. We also have we have a blog where we highlight important criminal justice stories. We also have our own podcast, which there's a link to on our menu, or you can just go to thebailpost.com.
Thank you, Ken.